Hello, can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear and see me here. Let's see. I think there's a delay. Can you hear me? Let me know if you can hear and see me here. Let's see. I think there's a delay. Oh, great. It looks like there's about a 10-second delay between the time that I do and say something. So if you post something and I don't respond right away, it's because of that delay. But great to see you. It looks like there's about a 10-second delay between the time that I do and say something. So if you post something and I don't respond right away, it's because of that delay. But great to see you. Oh, you know what it is? I'm not wearing earphones, so I need to wear earphones for the microphone and such, so that we don't get that type of massive delay. Let me turn off my volume on this end. But good to see everyone. Good to see you, Diana and Rose and PJB, Stamper. I just wanted to test out this video, and I don't know, how's the resolution? Is the resolution okay, or is it really blurry? Great to see you too. I'll get all this type of stuff worked out over time, but I thought we'd just run it right now. It's been one of those things that I've been thinking about or wanting to do for quite some time, but I've been playing around and fiddling around with different video and I don't know, microphones, and I thought, you know what, we just got to get doing it and broadcast and just see what happens, and just figure it out along the way. Otherwise, I'll never get around to it. But what I'm doing right here in this test video is that I wanted to do. I've been talking with some people about utilizing values and different colors to create depth in their scenes. Okay, and the utilization of the color scheme in order to create depth and atmosphere, okay? And one of the examples that I showed someone today was the use of something that would look pretty crazy in terms of the colors when you first stamp it out. But if you see these colors as not only a color scheme to use, but also a kind of a lighting scheme, because these would represent the different colors of light within a scene. We can utilize these colors for the objects that we're going to stamp out. So it's not just stamping out something in all black and then coloring it with a range of these things, but we're using these colors strategically to create depth within the scene by using these on the objects that we're going to use in here. Okay, so that being said, this is a dark brown. It probably looks black in the on your video screen here. But then we have, I don't know, just some different kind of mauves and browns in here, violets. And then I'll also use some distressings. Okay, so you can mix and match. But what this is going to represent right here is these are the closest objects, the darkest colors, okay? And then as you go farther back in the distance, these will represent the lighter, kind of more distant objects. All right, so let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so let me see if I grabbed everything before I started this video. I'm going to stamp some mountains in the background. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how people get really great video. So if there's anything I could do on my end, I don't know. Let me know if you guys know as far as settings go. On my end, all I did was I clicked a button that said go live, and that was it. Okay, so I'm going to stamp out these mountains in a dark brown, okay? And it will look probably kind of weird, but I was showing someone today that what happens is that we utilize these colors. It only will kind of come together and kind of make sense when we use the same colors in the blending process here. So I don't know, hopefully. I mean, I haven't done this like particular scene in quite some time. Let's see. I'm thinking about, I wonder if I should go with some, I didn't prep here. You guys jumped on so fast, you beat me to it. I thought I'd have some time. Oh, good. Here's my cloud that I was looking for here. Okay, let's see here. So what I'm going to do is, let's go with this purple right here. And I know this looks weird. It will. This is a deep lilac, okay? So this is, okay, so in the concept here, the dark brown is darkest. We're going lighter with the brown, and then this deep lilac. It's a little bit lighter than this brown. So in theory, it'll look farther away, okay? Now, normally I just do these, I might be doing it in one color scheme instead of like these separate colors, like in mixing warm tones and cool tones, but I wanted to show someone that you can, I haven't done this for a while, but you can really mix your colors and color temperatures and hue, as long as you kind of go back in and utilize those same colors in the coloring process. Okay, so let's see how this works here. Yeah, I think it looks okay. I mean, it doesn't look anywhere unified, though. Thanks for everyone for logging on, and by the way, watching the videos and subscribing and so on and so forth. I really appreciate it, and the feedback. I always say if anyone has any kind of requests for anything in particular, let me know, and I'll get around to it. I don't know, usually pretty fast, unless there's a video that's exactly what they're asking for already posted. Then I usually just refer them to it. But anyways, this is what's going on here. Let me zoom in for you guys. Okay, so a lot of kind of a separate types of looks here. Hello in Orlando, Florida. I taught there one time, I think twice, at Stamp Cabana in Orlando. Always a good time there. And attended one show there too. But hello, Carmen, and if I didn't say Anne, and anyone else in here. While on that same trip to Orlando, I think that might have been the same trip where I started off in Clearwater, and I ate grouper. I always remember the food of all these places that I went to. Okay, so we have all these kind of weird colors here, and it looks completely kind of unrelated and disparate, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense in terms of a general color scheme here. But what we're going to do now is we're going to bring in those same colors, okay? I'm going to add in additional colors as well that I don't have in printed out here. But let's just see if by the time I get to or through all of these different tones, if we'll have kind of a cohesive looking um, kind of a lighting scheme. It's supposed to kind of be like I would say a sunsetty kind of twilight type of um, setting here, time of day, whatever. And that's the light kind of that same spirit. It's kind of in the spirit of, I don't know, they call it the Hudson School of Landscape Painting, these real kind of romanticized versions of landscape. So it's typically done what photographers call the golden hour. It's that time of day, usually like an hour before sunset or during sunset into twilight and before sunrise. It's when all those colors in the sky get, I don't know, kind of much more present and, I don't know, kind of atmospheric. Hello in Arizona. Thanks for joining in. Great to see you. Okay, so what we're going to do, what I did here, this is what I always recommend. This is a trick that I started doing in my live workshops, okay? I don't know, it took me like 10 years to figure it out, but I eventually figured it out. People had no problem with stamping in the live workshops, but when I had them do their first color, in their color blending process, and just had them start off with a few drops of re-inker fluid on what was the sponges back then. I wasn't using paper towels in the class, but I could have. But we were using the stylus tools. I just had them start off with the re-inker fluid like that, and it just, no one could do anything wrong. And I mean literally, because it got them using the right amount of ink in terms of their application. They weren't getting, kind of marks that couldn't, blend away easily. They used the right kind of amount of ink, which is kind of an adequate amount, which is a lot of ink, okay? But it just, I don't know, that first color, I mean, it goes on, in terms of this type of process, not, we're not doing colored pencils here or something like that, which would be a different process, but I had them doing the dye-based ink applications. Hello, thanks for joining in, Doctor. Good to see you. It's great seeing everyone. All right, so adding in and just re-ink here. Okay, now what I'm going to be going through these other colors, okay? Now, if some of those other colors don't go on as smoothly, let's say, you're out in Arizona, like Laura there, these inks out in Arizona for her are drying, I don't know, I think 3 times as fast, okay? It's just that arid temperature. I don't know, I've taught out there before, but I don't know, I forgot about it. But, I mean, like, even, like, oil-based pigment inks dry really fast out there. Or they dry at all, okay? But see how easy this goes on? This is a piece of glossy cardstock too, okay? But it just goes on so nice and easy and beautifully and quickly. Okay, but as I start moving through these other colors, if it starts going on a little bit kind of, not so smoothly, what you do is you just go back and add another layer of your base coat to kind of moisten and kind of lubricate the surface, okay? So you don't have to kind of keep struggling through a current color like it was the dark color or something like that. But that's pretty much, all we need for that base coat there. Someone mentioned, when I was trying to explain things, they said, yeah, you're kind of like lubricating the page and in addition to coloring. So that makes all the other colors to come so much easier and kind of user-friendly to add. So let's say, just in an extreme example, you put down some kind of big, thick coating of it, of like a darker color. It'll blend away because the page is still a little bit moist, and whatever application of any color that you're on at that time it'll blend away just fine. But okay, let's move through this color and lighting scheme here, okay? So I'm going on with the walnut stain. It's kind of an earthy, kind of brown color. You know, those distress inks are always pretty good choices for your base colors because they're aged looking, which means they're, you know, they're not quite so intense and they're muted, you know, because they're supposed to look old, okay? All right, let's see. All right. Now with it, this is only the second color that I'm using right here, so what I'll do is I will roughly add this in about the same areas that I did with the first color, the antique linen. Now wait a minute, and we didn't do that type of technique out in those retreats. You know, everyone was all busy working on their own things, and you know, we went to these. There were these scenic stamping retreats out in Chicago or just Illinois in general, where everyone just, it wasn't class situations, but we just, you know, we bring our own stamps and materials, and then I don't know, it was just like 3 days of, or I don't know, 2.5 days of stamping, which was a lot of fun because a lot of people got to use all kinds of stamps from other companies too. Okay, but here this is coming on here. Now, like again, these are all kind of different looking tones still, but you can kind of see it roughly starting to come together here. Okay. Okay, but this is still really early. I haven't even used any of the colors that I stamp my objects in. And that's really the thing that's going to bring these all together. So, going back, kind of rewinding here a little bit. In my first classes, what I used to do is, now, I wasn't teaching a bunch of different techniques. You know, we can't, in a beginning class, cover composition and color schemes and colored pencils and, you know, alcohol inks and pastels and all that. So I taught them kind of the general concepts of lighting, composition, builds, and everything like that, working through, again, the dye-based inks here. But one of the exercises that I had them do is whatever color scheme they're going to be doing, let's say you're going to do a winter type of scene, and I had them grab their pads, okay, and just line them up going from light to dark like that, okay? If they want to do a sunset scheme, color scheme, they can go with yellows, oranges, you know, pinks and reds. And what this does is it makes the process of kind of color, composing their color schemes, it makes it visual instead of it being something kind of theoretical, okay? So they did these types of things, you know, and then it was really easy. I mean, we worked through a blue colored scheme on their first card, but after that, everyone went off on their own and did whatever color schemes they wanted to. So if they wanted to do a meadow with green grass, you know, they might do something like this. They knew what colors to pull out, and then they wanted to do blue skies up above. So they'd have these two types of things. That's a dark green there, not a black. But yeah, I mean, it's no kind of more, no more, I don't know, complicated than that. Just making things visual. You have a light, medium, and dark version of whatever color scheme or whatever hue you're working in. And then we just start off with the lightest ones. Now, I don't always do, you know, a lot of my scenes I know are kind of, they're mono kind of, not value, but they're mono kind of color schemed, you know, there's not like blue skies up above and, you know, whatever, green grass is down below. I do some of that, but a lot of times it's kind of those more kind of golden hour types of kind of periods that I'm representing. So anyways, okay, so that was the two just walnut stains. Now let's start moving into this right here, this little stack right here, okay? I didn't use this color at all either, but I kind of like that in the mix here. This is a orchid. Okay, I'll do it on one side, and I'll show you the difference between one side and the next. Okay, so you can kind of see those little differences in hue. See that difference between right over here, here, and here. And one of the things about moving kind of incrementally from one tone to the next, see, I'm not making a big jump. It's not a big jump in value. I'm not jumping to, you know, like a dark violet or something like that. This is like a really light version of a new kind of hue that I'm introducing in here. So you can always add a little bit and see if you like it in the darkest of areas. And if you like it, you can always add more. So it's not like a precarious type of exercise. It's just a little bit of a change at any given time, okay? Now, one of the things I can feel here is that as this starts to get more kind of moist and wet, saturated, I can feel my colors are not applying as fast, but that's a good thing because I don't get, you know, sudden, you know, some sudden marks that are kind of unintentional and undesired. You know, I can always kind of just apply a little bit of it, and if I like it, I can add more, or see right here, I can add kind of a good slathering of it. But if I don't like it, I can just, you can't really wipe it off. It still stains a little bit, but it's just such a kind of a small kind of a, oh, I don't know, kind of a mark or application of that color that it's not going to be any big deal. Now this is where everything for me comes in really easy, and that's what a lot of people think, oh my gosh, you know, you're an expert or something like that. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, PJ. Yeah, you know what? My camera focuses in pretty good, but I noticed in the Zoom calls and live broadcasts, it seems to respond slower. So I don't know. I'll try to figure that out over time. Okay, but hopefully it's not. Is it going out of? Let's see. Okay, yeah. What I'll do, maybe I won't do is I won't hold it up, but I'll like zoom in like this with the lens. I don't know if that helps a little bit. Okay, but can you guys kind of see kind of the direction this is kind of going right now? But you can see it's kind of coming into, the end result is, you know, it's coming into focus kind of slowly. And that is not to say that I know what this is going to look like in the end result, okay? That is like a foreign concept, you know, in a lot of types of stamping. But on this one, it's kind of one of those things that it's integral in terms of kind of the creative process. But I get it, though. If someone's just starting off with stamping, they want to know kind of where something's going. But a lot of times, kind of my point here with this is that things don't look like the end result midway through or something like that. Oftentimes, like with a scene like this one I think is really going to come together when I get to this bottom one right here, because this is the color that I stamped out my Lakeside Cove in. So a lot of times it's the darkest color that you've used in your scene being used as the blending type of thing. Okay, thanks there. Yeah, note taken. I won't hold it up. I won't do this, you know, so much anymore. Maybe it's, yeah, I do notice that now. I have a little preview screen and it's just not adjusting. I got to figure out all the kind of nuances of, or you know, just the basics of these live broadcasts here, but I always wanted to do them because if anyone has any questions, they can kind of ask right off the bat, or if you have any comments and whatnot. Okay, now this isn't a big jump in value here, but I notice it's kind of muting a little bit, making, not in a bad way, but it's just kind of mellowing out some of the applications a little bit. But the good thing with dye-based inks is that they're all transparent, so adding this over, completely covering up, you know, like the antique linen is influencing this overall color scheme right here. Let me give you an example here just to make a point here. And it's a good point because it really means to not kind of jump ahead too quickly if you want to get really deep saturated values. So let me just go on straight with the deep lilac, the one that I'm adding here. Okay, let's just add it straight here, okay? So this is just deep lilac right here. Oh, here. Sorry. Okay, so that's deep lilac there. I mean, it's a great color, but that's it right there. So look how much deeper and richer of a kind of an area that is in comparison to this. All right. And again, I really like that color, but if we're going for this kind of illusion of light coming from within the card like that, then the layering really kind of benefits. And then if you spray seal these pieces, it really makes them deep and pop and, you know, rich with value here. So, all right, so adding this around on the perimeter like that. Okay, now here's where, for me, things get a lot more interesting. And that's with the use of colors that I have stamped out my imagery in, okay? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're going for there, with the color coming from within. Now, it's happening because we're layering down all these tones, so it's like these glazes that we're putting over one another. You know, you're glazing a turkey or something like that. That skin, when it comes out, it's like deep. Or if we stain wood or something like that, all the grains of the wood really become a lot more apparent and deep. And then, you know, we can do things like use not just stains, but glazes over the top of it. Everything just becomes so much more kind of apparent in terms of depth. Visual depth becomes so much more extreme. Okay, so here comes the brown. But the brown isn't going to necessarily look like the brown impressions because I'm adding it over all these other colors. And then I'm using the same paper towel here, which is or, you know, whatever applicator you happen to be using, you could use a sponge, but utilize the same one so that you get a little bit of a mix between whatever color you happen to be adding in at the time and the previous one. And then the more you use this, it will become more of the straight version of that color. So you're getting kind of mixtures in there, okay? Now this, I'm doing all this right here with the dye-based inks, but you can do this with things like, you can stamp out these objects. If you're doing it on like a matte paper, you can do it with pastels. It's not transparent like this, or you can do it with colored pencils. You can do, you know, you can work your layers that way. It's going to be a different look to it, but it's the exact same concept of using, you know, different colors to represent different depths of objects and different kind of intensity of light hitting those objects, okay? So what I mean by light, though, too, is this represents kind of the lighting scheme, or not that one, but this one right here, the lighting scheme of this, okay? So more distant objects, light is reflecting off that, and by the time it gets back to your eye, it's going through so much more like dust and moisture in the air, etc. That's why more distant objects look lighter. And what I've done here is a little bit of a tweak here. See, I could have stamped out everything in black here too. I probably wouldn't do the clouds, but you can stamp these mountains back here in this Lakeside Cove large with all black if you want to, okay? And that would look fine too. It's just a different look. But what I've done is a little trick on this one where we're going for extreme depth is I've reserved the use of black for only my closest of objects, which I'll add in later though, because I like to add it in later and just see how my scenery is looking and where I can add in those foreground objects. Like I might like some of the light that's happening in here, so if I had a tree already kind of placed in there, you know, that area is already set, but if I really like something that's happening in there, maybe instead of a foreground tree placed right here, I'll place it off to the side a little bit or something like that. And also, if, you know, I mean, too, we're adding in a ton of color like this. So, you know, if you're using like a moist or wet, super wet black pad, going over that like this, I mean, it could, potentially smear it. So why not just take that completely out of the equation by just stamping it last, okay? And also, that's one of those things, too. I always tell people, um, you don't have to know every component that's going to go into your scenes when you start off with. In my classes, when I used to teach it, it's going to, when I do like online classes going forward, it's going to be a little bit different because, not everyone is going to have the exact same stamp. So I'm probably going to base it around a set, but I used to take just trays and trays of wood-mounted stamps, and it was a mix of main objects, background objects, sky objects, and foreground objects. So what they did was I just told them they could stamp whatever they wanted right off the bat. So I'd tell them just to pick out one main object, be it a cabin, a lakeside cove, a waterfall, whatever, and then pick out the sky element. So there's just two objects that's all they had to think about, okay? And the thing that they did was they stamped out their main object in black, or their foundational object, and then they stamped out their sky in a color out of their color scheme so they can pick whatever they wanted. And then they'd add in those colors, and then they would think about the foreground elements, or if they wanted to stamp a bird in the sky or some kind of subject in here, a canoeist or a fisherman or whatever, then they can do that kind of as one of the last processes, of kind of finishing off their scene. So it made it really easy for them. They didn't have to get overwhelmed. Some people look at the end result like this and they get overwhelmed. They think, oh my God, there's no way I can do that. And it's because they can't tell did you stamp the imagery first? What colors came first? What stamp is that? It's all kind of blended together. But in terms of a process, though, it's really easy to do because you're not having to think about all that in the beginning. You're just kind of taking it one step at a time. I mean, when you're starting out, yeah, it's kind of good to know, but where you're going. But in terms of the process, though, like I don't know what I'm doing or what things are going to look like, especially if I'm using a new medium or technique, which I've been doing a lot lately. But I just know that, okay, I'm just going to start on this one thing at a time, and then I'll get to, I don't know, whatever, white, opaque ink fogging or whatnot. Okay, I'm using the brown now, okay? So the brown is really starting to anchor things down because it's the same ink that I used to stamp out my main imagery in, okay? Hello, Sandy and Meg. Or did I already say that? Or did you just join in? I'm just looking up right now. Was anyone ever on AOL? It's kind of reminding me of AOL, except I'm not typing here. In those chat rooms. Whatever happened to the chat room? I guess people still do that, but I don't know. It's not as much. Conference rooms or whatnot. Okay, here. So, adding that in, we're getting a little bit more containment here, right? Okay. This is the brown. It's kind of bringing things together a little bit more. Okay. But that is the color scheme right there, or it's the color scheme, but it's also the lighting scheme, right? Because the only difference is between like a color scheme and a lighting scheme is that we've retained those areas of light that we want to, instead of coloring in the whole thing. So a lot of times when people first start off with scenic stamping, they might feel kind of inclined to fill in this whole area, the water area, uniformly, okay? And just by the retention of lighter areas, now you're a lighting director instead of just a coloring director. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I could have had this light over here and darker over here. You can kind of make this kind of light source and reflected light dynamic the way however you want to. Okay, now something like this isn't, particularly great for little detailed areas, so you can always mix and match your media too. And these days, I mean, it's so much easier these days with the the presence of things like pens like this. Okay, so see these colors right here are somewhat similar to the colors that I've just used right here, right? Antique linen, the orchid, and deep lilac right there. There's kind of the equivalent types of colors in pen form, so you can utilize that as well. So what I'm doing right here, and this is where like shading doesn't have to be a mystery either. Do you see on, oh, I hope that's not, okay, so here we go like this. You can see the lighter areas of the rocks and then the shaded areas. Typically it's on the lit side, or the top area of the rock that it's lit. So it's being top lit. So in the shadow areas and the water's edge, you can come into it with additional tones. And see, I hit it with kind of a lighter value first, okay? Like this. It's not super dark. And see, things I'm doing is I'm kind of staying away from the top sides of those rocks so that those can be light to represent top lighting again. So going on here like this, you can use your blender pen as well. Those were those two colors. Here's like a, I don't know, like a pink tinge. So what you're doing is you're bringing in some of that same kind of lighting that you've done over here, but you're putting it in the shadows. Oftentimes the shadows are the areas that have the kind of the strongest intensities of color, because they're not getting washed out by, like bright light. All right, so this is a little bit of a periwinkle, kind of like that blue that's kind of up in those clouds up there. All right. I hope that squeak isn't driving you crazy. Okay. Thanks, Laura. Glad you like it. Okay, now this is really going to pop now. I really like when I kind of get to this period of the scene, or especially when I'm doing it with that dark brown. I love adding in that kind of final color out of my color scheme, but this is where this scene is really going to kind of pop, and we're going to really take advantage. Oops, did my screen get really blurry there for a minute? Let me zoom out. I think it's zooming in on my, or it's focusing on my hands here. Sorry about that. I try to be much more conscientious of not working off screen, especially in a live broadcast, but you can scold me if I do that. I often get just absorbed into working on my scenes, so I'll zoom in on those on the videos, working on like some kind of little tight detail, and I forget to zoom out. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to re-ink my black ink because I want these impressions over the top of this, my foreground imagery, to be really nice and dark here, okay? And, I mean, this is not wet to the touch or anything like that, but we have a moist surface so that if I go in, or when I go into my scene with these types of images now, if I don't kind of, you want to have it pretty juicy and moist. These would be cool in embossing too. I'm not going to emboss right now, but I really want to hit it with a pretty good amount of ink, okay? All right, so these images for me are going to dry fairly slowly, so I don't want to do this too early in the process because, I might smear it or I might have to heat set it, okay? So as you apply your foreground imagery over this kind of moist, semi-moist surface and pulp of the paper, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this down a little bit longer and allow that ink to stain and transfer onto and into the surface there. Glad to be live, Sandy. It's fun here. I finally got to around to kind of learning this. I don't know the software real well, but oh my gosh, I was like struggling last night trying to figure out how they did picture in picture. Not that you needed to see me, but I don't know. Just so you know, it's like a robot or something like that. Doing all these videos or whatnot. Okay, so there we go. There's one side of the scene. See how much depth you can create? Oh, sorry about that. Here, zoom in here like that. But see how much depth you can create by retaining the all, your foreground areas for that darkest of tone. Okay, so, and it's just really utilizing just the colors that you're going to be using anyway. So it's not like you have to kind of, you know, overthink things from a strategic point of view. If you're going to use, if you're going to do a winter scene or something like that with, a range of blue tones or something like that, all you do is you just take one of these colors and stamp out your objects that are not the closest to you in one of those colors. Usually I recommend something like a medium to, kind of in that medium to dark tone. Like I wouldn't stamp out like that mountain in the background with, the antique linen, okay? Because we used antique linen as the base color to color everything up. And if you use the lightest of color that's, possible, it has, there's a chance that it's just going to disappear with the first color that you lay down, okay? All right, does that make sense? Okay, now, that being said, if you ever add in tones, like I can barely see that mountain back there, but I can see this version of it right here, but over here, it barely shows up. Now, if you just kind of completely eradicate, and bury something that you wanted to be able to see in the background, all you have to do is just go back into your color scheme and say, okay, stamp that mountain out in that brown there. I'll go in with maybe the dark brown, and all you do is just reintroduce it, but in a darker color, right over the tops of the colors that you've already added in there. So there's no point in time when you can't go back in and just reintroduce it. You can even stamp that brown over the top of this black, and it'll still look like it's behind the tree because it's a lighter color, and these inks are transparent. So anyway, all right, so let me do a little bit of an overhang here. If you just kind of logged in here, I'm stamping out a scene from the gallery section. This is real similar to a composition that I did, I don't know, I think it was 2000 and, wait, when was it? I don't know. It was like 20 years ago practically, I think, when I looked at it. Okay, so this is an overhanging tree limb here. Kind of frame the scene off slightly, maybe, hopefully. All right, so see that right there? It's kind of a frame. When you do this, we're framing off the composition with value. It's darker on the outside edges, but you can also do imagery again, okay? And from kind of an emotional sense, when you do this type of thing like this, when you add in these objects that are fairly close to you, when someone's looking at a card that's of a scene like this, it's kind of emotionally transportive. Okay, so as I'm doing a scene like this, maybe not if I'm kind of doing this as a demonstration because I'm conscious of, kind of instruction here. But if I'm just stamping this out on my own, kind of in a subconscious way or an emotional way, I'm being transported into that location, which is different with scenic stamping than a lot of other genres because we're stamping locations that, you could be in, okay? And I think that by adding in, this is my theory, when you're adding in closer things to you, that you can reach out and practically touch, okay? It changes kind of the emotional kind of tone of the scene, because you can be there, But here are these objects, that are much closer to us that you can almost reach out and touch, if you were in that space. Okay, I don't know, that's what I generally think about uh, in terms of my theory in foreground objects. But it also just looks good. It frames things off, I don't know, from a compositional sense. So it gives us kind of a head start if we are going to mat your card, which also frames things off, but those foreground images really do that. Okay, so let me see right here. This is one of the things that I hope everyone, if they like the look, of course, really kind of attempts here, but it's just so much fun to do. So here's the thing with white pigment ink embellishment here, okay? So the distant objects in here have been represented by lighter values, okay? And like even this right here on this Lakeside Cove, right here, I've drawn, I'm using scale to represent more distant objects. So as you go back around in the cove, those trees get smaller. So I'm using scale for distance here. In this scene right here, we're using value for distance. So things in the more distant areas are lighter. Okay, you can do these all grayscale too. I could have stamped out, those rocks in kind of a second impression. I can ink this up with black and I can stamp it out and then stamp it up there, and it'd be like a gray kind of background, for kind of monochromatics. Okay, but going back to my point here with the white pigment ink, okay, so if those objects in the distance are represented by smaller trees, by scale, and by value, if I've retained some areas of light in here, or white of the paper, what I'm doing with this is I'm representing that same light being applied in here. So instead of just having to retain the white of the paper, we're adding it back in. So this is just such a formidable ability to do, because if you missed something, or so, you know what I mean, you didn't get something right, and mine I do all the time, like right around in here, it's a little bit rough with that cloud. I can just go back in like this and just eradicate my unintentional marks or whatever. Okay, it's hard to see what's happening right here with the white because there's not a lot of contrast right there. But that's what you do. You start it in the areas with a lot, without a lot of contrast, and what you do is you move it into the darker areas. Hello, Carmen. Let's see, what did you say there? It's very bad to step away and come back. Oh, so there was yeah, we had transformation there. I don't know when you stepped away. But going back in and okay, now let's really make this apparent with this white now, okay? So I'm going to take this white. You don't want a big glob of it. My pad is really practically dry here, okay? But if you have a brand new pad, be careful about that. You can use whatever. You don't have to use the Brilliant, so you can use like the Hero Hues or whatever brand, Stampin' Up, whatever. Okay, but let's add some of this on these trees right down here, okay? And I'm just doing it very slowly, okay? I'm not like white out or something like that. It's just barely visible with each tap, okay? So, I don't know, like 12 taps or something like that. And you have just this really faint application. Sorry, my hand's in the way there. But see that? It's kind of looking more distant right in there the more white I apply, right? I hope you guys can see all that. I don't know, yeah. If you're watching like on a phone, I don't know if it's really apparent there, but okay. Here's the thing too with the white too, on the glossy at least. If you apply it and you don't like it, then you can just wipe it right off. Okay, so see this right at the base of this mountain here? I can apply some of that as well. I'm being careful not to stamp it into the those wet foreground trees and overhanging limbs there, because they're still wet with that black ink. Okay, this would be a fun one with some rays coming out too. You've seen me do those rays on some of the videos if you've watched enough of them, but that would be cool here too. But look at that atmosphere right in there. How does that look? Okay, now here's the thing too. For me, um, this is one of the few times in rubber stamping. I'm talking about in terms of a technique, not this scene in particular, but everything that we do in rubber stamping, typically we want things nice and crisp, right? We don't want to stamp something out and have it kind of blurry or anything like that. We can stamp in lighter tones. We can stamp our things out in lighter colors like a pastel, whatever. But it's still a very crisp impression of that soft, light pastel color, okay? Like these clouds up here, those are stamped out in a, you know, deep lilac. So it was very light and kind of pastel-y violet, okay? But this is really making those clouds look a lot softer. So what you're doing, okay, what I'm getting at is this, for the most part, is a very crisp textural statement, okay? But if you just go like this, and don't have to apply a lot of it either, okay? Like, see, right around the base of this area down here, and I'm only doing it because it's light in there, okay? I'm not doing it out here where it's real dark, okay? But you just apply a little bit like that, okay? And even if it's a tiny little bit, it's the area on the scene that has kind of a textural difference. So suddenly we found something like, say this is the textural scale. We have crisp over here and soft over here, okay? Before I added that in, what we're looking at is like everything is up here. Okay, this is like the midway point, okay? I mean, the clouds are soft, so, you know, from a textural standpoint, they're soft, okay? But what we've done is, by adding that in there, you've taken that and gone like that, okay? Even if it's in the smallest of areas, so that you have this gigantic textural range. It doesn't have to be equal. You don't have to have an equal amount of soft with crisp, but just having it somewhere in there really kind of expands on the visual language of what you're doing. And I mean, a lot of people think, oh my God, you know, that's going to take, you know, they look at the end result and they think, I can never do that, okay? But, you know, it's all these little types of things like that. This is easy to do right here, okay? But it's all these little cumulative, little like nothing kind of processes here that add up to an overall kind of you know, more complex visual statement than really what it requires to do, you know, from a technique standpoint, okay? And we used to do this. I teach like basically everything in like a course of like 2 classes over 6 hours, but you know, people then, it didn't take until the, you know, the end part of the class for people to get it. There's, you know, they got it right away. So for a technique like this part though, with the white ink, the thing that makes it easy though, like in a live workshop, is I just made sure they retained some of that lightness of their scene. So I'd say, okay, stop right there. Don't, you know, fill it all in with color, so that when they come into this kind of technique like this, it's just really easy to do. You know, you can go like this, you know, that's not good technique right there, but it's not going to, you know, be kind of like some kind of really super undesirable kind of mark that we have to remedy with you know, doing some repair work or something like that. So let's see. So let's push this back in the distance a little bit more. Okay. This white ink kind of in a user-friendly way dries darker and more transparent than what it looks like when it's wet. So that being said, if you want to get it a little bit lighter, sometimes you have to let it dry, or you can heat set it too, and it'll dry right away. And then you can just kind of build it up, and you can build up a more kind of a thick layer of that white and get it to, you know, move more towards opacity. Okay, you don't want it opaque, but it's kind of moving in that direction there. Let's see, what did you ask, PJ? Marine. Oh. Delayed. I want to tap on the video and then move the red dot all the way to the right. Is that's for them, or is that for me? Okay, so anyways, that is that. That's, you know, I don't know. I hope I've sold you on the white. I can't tell you how many times this is This is what brings together my pieces, even if it doesn't look good through 99%, I don't know, maybe 95% of the process. When I add this in there, it solves everything. I can't tell you, that enough, express that enough. And I always mention it in the videos, but no one believes me. Everything that you do is going to come up fine. But I don't worry about certain types of steps along in the process, though, which is different because um, and because I know that I can add this in the end result. It's especially with things like those really super bright, crazy 3 millimeter pens and all those paint pen marks. It looks kind of crazy and super busy. But this is the thing that can mellow everything out really fast for you in a really great way. It obscures what you want to de-emphasize, but I think it looks great too. It's not only to enhance, but it's to de-emphasize. It's like, don't look over there. I don't want you to see that so much. So I put it in like I don't try to cover it up completely, which you could do in scenic stamping with just like a tree. But if you just want to, kind of de-emphasize something, all you do is kind of put it behind like this kind of bank of fog or something like that. And, it's all good. Okay, so this is the paint pens, and paint pens too can bring a lot of things together. I don't think I need a lot in here, but just some of those little detailed areas. Let me see if I can move my camera down slightly. Okay, that I don't want to move it too much. Okay, now where do we add these? Okay, so on all of my different stamps, okay, I try not to have any lines. I had to have them on the birch trees, but you can see where there's lighter areas, like on the tops of rocks in here, for example, okay? So you shade where there's shade on the base of, the objects. And, you don't have to look at that. You can just see it right here. So in the lighter areas, what I do is I just take and I add in. Now these rocks are fairly light, so let's see. Let me get this working here. I didn't shake it up adequately. Okay, and perfect. Now there's not going to be a lot of contrast. It's not going to be like, oh my gosh, look at that lighting on top of that rock, because I'm adding white on top of a fairly light looking rock, but I'm just adding in little highlights. Now the darker the rock, the less light I put into it, because you're going to have more highlights on a very illuminated object, okay? But let's say over here where these rocks are kind of more in the shadows, I can put a few little dots like that where they're capturing some of that light. But this gives your scenes a little bit of kind of twinkle, or a lot of times in scenes where I get to, there might be some areas that are less interesting looking than others, okay? What you can do, now I won't go too crazy with this, but I'll start adding some of these little highlights. Let's see if you can see that. I hope you can see this right here. But see these little areas out here, I'm adding in this light on these trees, okay? So more, but not a lot, okay, in those areas. But see this area out here. And I can also use color, okay? I have the, like, tan colors, which maybe is a good idea for me to use here. But see, as I move into the darkness, I have less highlights, okay? It's just the same thing with shadows. The darker areas over here, I can use more shadows, with the alcohol inks or whatever. So with highlighting, I need more space. I always joke around that no matter how much space us stampers have to work with, we end up stamping in like a 8 by 8 inch area on our table. We can 10 feet of clear space, but we end up with like a few inch area in which to work. Okay, so adding those highlights. Let's see, I'm working off screen here, sorry. Let's see. Okay, so see, as I move away from that light in here, I'm getting a few less dots right here. Okay, but let's take a look at this and let's see what this looks like here, okay? So, those, oh, I forgot. I'm so used to doing the other videos here. Let's see. Hello, Rose. Okay, so anyways, do you see where there's more dots kind of in this area here? And then as it moves out, it's getting darker and darker, so I have less highlights like that. But, okay, so you can see these areas in here. It kind of brings out those trees a little bit more from the, from the background. Otherwise, you can see how, dark it is right there. Let me see something too. I think my camera's, the scene is a little bit lighter than what it looks like. Let me see if I can adjust my contrast here. Okay, I think that what I did there, I just adjusted my camera slightly. Let me see if that, I have a delay here. Once I shoot something, it takes about 10 seconds to show what I'm looking at here. Okay, that's a truer kind of representation of the card right there. But you can see in these areas right in here, it brings out the tree a little bit, even like a couple little dots. It's kind of representative of that reflective area in there. But yeah, it really can, Rose. It really brings out objects from the distance, and it puts light and almost extreme contrast in those areas, but in a very kind of detailed and I don't know, kind of. It's not subtle. I mean, I could go more subtle. See, here's the thing that I do too. Now that I have these pens, the other colors of pens, but this, like, I could use like a darker dot in the darker areas, so you get the same kind of idea of this reflected light, but it's not as bright of reflected light as using all white. Okay. Okay, but I'm not going to do that right now. But let's see here. All right, so I'm going to stamp in this little solo canoeist because that is the. If you just kind of joined in, what I'm doing here is I'm kind of referencing a scene that I did years and years ago, and I wanted to do it again here. But now this one right here, see, it's this little canoeist, and you can stamp it out in like a dark brown, like I did with this Lakeside Cove, and it would set it back kind of in a visual sense a little bit more. Or if you want it to really kind of stand out a little bit more, then you just stamp it in black. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the bottom of this a little bit so that it kind of transitions a little bit more from wet to dry in the impression. I was talking with someone about using partials in terms of their impression, and getting varied impression strength. So going from something like, like a wet, darker area on top of this mountain to a lighter one down there, just by you wipe off some of the ink before you make the impression like that. And that gives me a little bit of a head start, like on something like this where I added that white down at the base there. A lot of times what I used to do is I added white pigment ink at the base of trees to make it look like there's a low-lying fog on the surface of the forest or something like that. Then I thought, well, why don't I just kind of, wipe off some of that ink just to begin with, so it's just inherently lighter to begin with. So that's where that comes into play. It gives it a little bit more atmosphere when you have varied value impressions. Okay, you can stamp them out in a different color, but you can also alter your impression strength by just wiping some of it off and then stamping it. So you get this inherently varied value impression, and which really gives you a head start because those lighter values represent light hitting those objects. Not to make things complicated, but all it means is just I can stamp this out in black, and if I dab some of these branches like this and some of the ink off of it, they'll stamp out. If I'm doing this in black, they'll stamp out gray. So it looks like the light is coming from above. Okay. So let's say this tree, where would that apply? Let's say if I'm going to stamp a sun down here, and I know I'm going to stamp this tree right here, okay? I can say, okay, the sun is right here, so I can bottom light this tree limb by wiping off some of that ink that I've applied on there and then just stamp it out so that it looks like the light from the sun is hitting that. So, there's a little tweaks like that, that aren't hard kind of applications or processes, but they make a, they can make a big difference, but they also remove the need for you to do things post impression because they're already in the impressions themselves like that. So anyway, does anyone have any questions? Is anyone still here? I'm glad everyone was able to join in here. Thanks so much for the feedback and those little tips and stuff in terms of what I need to do with these live broadcasts, because I can't see what you guys are seeing on that side, but yeah. But if you were here, yeah, play around with your color schemes and whatnot, and I don't know, it's a different look to it though. In terms of the utilization of color within your images. This would look fine if I stamped everything out with black, but it's going to have a different look to it. So I think it's a different kind of emotional quality. But anyway, thank you so much for joining in. Great to see everyone. And we'll do this again sometime. If there's any kind of requests, that people want to see and you want to see it live, let me know. We take requests here. All right. Have a good rest of night. And thanks again for joining in. Thanks. Had a fun time. And yeah, Diana, your stamps are on the way. But we'll do some more lives. Yeah, I really wanted to do this, but I'm glad it worked. I was always worried about kind of it looking. I tried it before, like a couple of years ago on different software, and it was like so blurry looking at, I hated it, but I think we have something that'll work now. So yeah, but stay tuned, and we'll do some more scheduled ones too, but I think I'll be doing just kind of these pop-up ones on occasional, so if you do, I think if you subscribe, I don't know, do you get notifications if someone goes live? Or if you hit the notifications button or something like that too, I think you'll know if I'm on. So yeah, and maybe we'll do some just kind of stamp alongs together live too. So if people have the same stamps or sets, I'll put a notification out there of what to grab, and you can grab it and stamp along with me in some of these different techniques. So all right. So again, thanks so much again. Great seeing everyone. And again, thanks everyone for your support and for watching the videos and so on and so forth. So yeah, have a great rest of the night, and we'll see you on the next broadcast.